This afternoon, we were supposed to have 3 people on this panel, but we have, including me, I'm not a panelist, but with Mohua, we also had Anukriti Upadhyay, who unfortunately was not able to make it. But I think that just gives us an opportunity to have a richer conversation with Mohua, because she is somebody who has written across genres. She's not just a short story writer, but she's also a podcaster. And as some of you may know, podcasting is like my medium of choice, so I'm really happy to be in conversation with her. Mohua has, as she will tell you herself, is I think what some people call a hybrid professional. She discovered herself as a writer, I would say somewhere towards the middle of life. And it's been a struggle to define herself as a woman who has something to say. And also in the journey of finding her own voice, I think she's also diversified and started started a podcast where she's able to, I think, feed into that, her discovery of her own voice, into a platform that gives other people voice. So I think that's something that I'd like her to talk about a little bit. But first of all, one of the reasons she's here today is because of a new collection of short stories that is available and is out now, called Nautanki Sala and Other Stories. And the title is intriguing. And maybe Mohua, if she has some time, can read a little bit from that title story. But it's a collection of stories of women. And what I found most intriguing about the collection is that it's really written in a very distinctive voice. I should say voices, because the story gives voice to the experiences of displacement. And that displacement is not always of a geographic nature, but it can also be of a psychological nature, of an emotional nature. And I think displacement is a term that women actually will recognize in multiple ways, because right from when they're born in our traditional societies, they're told that they're being raised in order to go to another home. So it's like their whole life is about this impending displacement. So that's a certain kind of displacement. But then there are also other kinds of displacements that Mohua talks about in her book. So I'd like to ask you, Mohua, to start off to describe your journey towards writing, and how you, as you have said yourself, both on your podcast and in other platforms, how you struggled through this process of redefining or defining yourself.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone for taking out the time to be here. Thank you, Usha. To redefine myself, I had no choice, because I think I was really an example of a very common empty nester. And there are many women like me who are empty nesters, and some of us choose to stay at home, and we kind of don't negotiate what we are choosing at that time. And then over the years, we get lost between those 4 walls of a home, of managing a child. And I think as a woman, we try and find our value through the eyes of our children, how well they do, if you're married, through your husband's, career, or with all the things around but ourselves. And I was no different. When my son left, I tried to get a job, because I had been in very senior positions in the past in an advertising agency, managing a PR role. But nobody was interested in offering me any work. And they really thought that as a homemaker, I would not be able to indulge in any conversation that would be intellectually stimulating for, for people. Um, I was very, very new with the technology world at that time because I think I had become a dinosaur. I come from an era of pen and paper and, of course, also a typewriter and then the computer and then a small laptop that I was extremely frightened of. And well, I embrace technology, slow and steady. And I find it, very amusing because a lot of youngsters of today don't understand how difficult it was for me to walk inside a cafe to start writing. Because at home they did not understand, the people around me, what I was doing on my own. And as a writer, when you're writing down, your entire stream of thought gets disturbed if you're constantly being called out. But walking to that cafe itself for me is such a significant part of the growing up of my times where I've never walked in alone, and everybody around me was about 15 years younger or 20. And from there, I began writing small blogs that I wrote actually on textiles and on arts and crafts and on gender. I felt very strongly about my situation and many women who were not able to reboot themselves, reinvent themselves, and they were lost. But the writing really took me forward. I met a lot of fantastic people in that entire journey. I wrote for brands across India. And from there, I began my journey of podcasting and also writing the whole book. And and here we are.
Um, so if you can talk a little bit about, so what came first? Was it the podcast or was it the writing? I mean, from what you were saying, it seems like you started writing and then went into podcasting, right?
The writing, of course, came first because writing is a very natural play time for me. I am really with myself when I write. And actually, by chance, I fell upon a brand that had asked me to voice my writing. And they said that they would use that for their Women's Day campaign. And from there, I went on to get quite a few jobs as a voice artist. And I did my own writing, and I also gave that voice. From there, I started interviewing people, and I really didn't know where I was going to go with the podcast. But yes, today it's among the 10 best podcasts in the country. We've had a growth of about 100% in the last few months only. Mm-hmm. And podcasting is, of course, second, but very much an integral part of my writing too. But writing came first, of course.
So I do want to come back to the podcast a little later, but if you could talk about, moving into fiction, and in some ways, for those of you who may have seen the book, or if you haven't, just to give you a little bit of background, the book is a collection of short stories, but I found that the style is something that seems to combine reportage and fiction. Because at the beginning of every story, you have a little epigraph, and then at the end of every story, she has a factoid that relates that particular story to the larger statistics concerning women. So it may be about women in migration, it may be about women in domestic violence, but so it's clear that the stories come from reality. I mean, like all stories do. I mean, all stories do come from reality, but could you talk a little bit about how you came upon that particular form and why you decided to do that particular set of stories?
So my writing actually began, in 2017 when I started writing on Facebook, and I started writing on Instagram. And those days, I think the number of words was very limited. It had to be within 250 words. And I was very shocked, with the abysmal loss of data, of the number of displacement that happens, the number of people, women who've been raped in the Bangladesh genocide. And being a Bengali myself, I have been deeply moved with many families that I've met, women who've been displaced, women who could never find their lives all over again. And they continue to live and then die in that loss. And so I just felt that data would be a great reminder for people to know that this really exists and it's not a figment of my imagination. Because I it's very difficult to explain to many people what it is for maybe as a Bengali, my father and my mother, what is the kind of that deep innate need of wanting to get back to their culture, that deep sense of wanting to belong to a place, but they couldn't belong because of economic shifts, because of their lives. So I just felt that the data would really add to this, to the stories that I was putting together. And these are real stories of people that I'd met. So most of them are my protagonists, are people I've met.
And in terms of, displacement, was a theme that you had decided on, or was it that as you were collecting these stories, it turned out that all of them were about displacement, and particularly the community you mentioned of people from Bangladesh who were forced to migrate to India?
Well, displacement has been a huge part of my own life. I was raised in a very small town in the east of India called Shillong. And, there was an insurgency during the 1980s, and every Bengali was asked to leave their homes. Many Bengalis' homes were taken over by the army. Many of us left overnight. I left overnight. Schools were shut. And I don't know if the rest of India is completely aware of what goes on in the Northeast. And, I just recently also wrote an article about the rat mining that happens in Meghalaya, where there are very young children who are, migrant laborers who come in there, and they're sent into these coal mines to mine. And it was very shocking that a journalist actually said, "Oh my God, does this happen?" And so we're very cut off, and I do realize that having shifted into Delhi was, of course, very embracing for me. It remains what I call myself a Delhi girl because it embraced me. It took me in. It didn't care whether I was a Bengali, unlike Shillong, where at every step of the way we were bullied for being a Bengali. To that extent, I did not want to tell them my real name as Mohua. And in school, there was such a clear disparity between the Bengalis and the the Khasis. And we were just kept onto a side. And that's not something that everybody wants to talk about, so somebody needs to give this a voice.
Yeah, I mean, I think journalists from the Northeast, people like Patricia Mukhim, for instance, have talked about the fact that the rest of India has very little understanding of what life actually is like in the Northeast, and particularly the deep politics of the region. And so in some ways, short stories are a way to particularize that experience, right? So what, I mean, and again, this is something that varies across caste lines, across class, and in your book, you actually have stories that cut across all of these intersections. So you do have stories of people from what we might consider extremely disadvantaged communities, as well as those with privilege or with relative privilege. So how did those conversations happen? Did you go out with the idea of writing fiction in your mind, or how did you collect these experiences?
Well, most of my protagonists from the book are people I've met.
Yeah.
So, there's this story in my book, Biswas Will Not Speak About Her, is again based out of Shillong, where this is a matrilineal tribe, the Khasis, but they need a man to complete them in their entire journey. The identity of a woman is in its absolute recognition with a man. And in spite of it being a matrilineal community where she doesn't have to take the surname of the husband, they still need that. And this story is about, it's I think chapter 13, or if I'm not mistaken, Biswas Will Not Speak About Her, is where I've chronicled the life of women that I've met who've just been dead with grief and loss because a man just didn't complete them. Mm-hmm. So in spite of their cultural, nuances of being able to lead a very independent life, which most of other parts of India may not be able to exactly imagine, mm-hmm. that, your husband comes into your home to live with your parents, but still they need a husband. They can't do without that. So those were my questions in the book. How independent are we in our thinking, in our ability to be able to embrace the matrilineal culture?
Yeah, and I think that's something people don't completely understand in other parts of India. What does matrilinearity actually mean? It doesn't necessarily mean that a woman is always in control. It's just that there are certain conventions that perhaps allow women to take charge in certain spaces. But again, I'm going back to that same question in terms of the meetings with these women happen. You've had conversations with all of these women, but at what point did you decide that you were going to write a book of short stories?
Well, the entire writing of the book was a very, I don't think I gave too much of a thought about it. I think I just enjoyed the process of writing. The whole book came together because people really appreciated the writing that I used to do on social media. And I think social media kind of gave me my wings to restart all over again. And the very newspapers who were not willing to give me work today are carrying my columns on a regular basis. And I think I don't think I had a real thought behind writing this and putting a book together. I was extremely insecure. I was extremely shy. I had years of being apologetic for not being intelligent enough. And so the book also, when it came out, I was constantly trying to explain myself, and I don't think it was very conscious that I'm going to become an author, become a writer, become a podcaster. I don't think so.
So it's interesting, I mean, we usually talk about social media as an anti-force to reading, right? Something that takes people away from books and reading. But instead, you've done the reverse journey. You started with writing on social media and then went into slightly longer form. And then podcasting, if we wanted to move to podcasting, that's another space. Just yesterday or earlier this morning, Shrayana Bhattacharya was saying something about how podcasting is often dismissed as a lazy medium, as something that doesn't make you intelligent. I would, of course, beg to disagree with that. But in some ways, okay, you come into writing through social media, then you write this set of short stories, and as somebody who is afraid of technology, you then move on to this other platform that allows you to do something very different. And earlier when we were talking, this was about discovering your voice, but podcasting allows you to share that ability to find voice with other people. So was the podcasting journey related to your corporate work, or did it emerge from your creative side?
I think everything that I do now is very consciously creative. And yes, I cannot ignore the marketing part because I have a very wonderful team of people who have believed in me. And so I cannot make this completely creative and all about myself. I have to look behind me, that there are people who have joined me and they've decided to put their future in my hands. So, and having been in the public relations industry and having worked across, companies and brands, I do understand branding to an extent. And yes, it is eventually now taking the form of a marketing space that I absolutely abhor, but it is what it is.
But the podcast itself doesn't sound like a marketing vehicle. So I'm not sure if any of you have heard it, but in the podcast, Mohua talks to people of various kinds. So you have creators, you have business people, you have business people, yes, but also people in governance, in the social sector, and so on. So how do you decide? I mean, if you had to describe what the podcast does and what you aim to do with it, what would that be?
Like I said, the start of my story was also about people whose voices are not heard, especially Northeast, which has been a huge significant part of my life. So the podcast also is about unheard voices and heard voices too. What do I aim to do with it? I'm hoping that in time to come, we would be able to curate podcasts for brands to come ahead who would like to be associated from the CSR activity. Yes, and we have a lot of authors who are there on my podcast, because authors like me are always looking to figure ways and means to get their book to be seen, heard, read, and publicized. And it is a limited medium. So my podcast does work on a very special place where we've spoken to a lot of authors across. In fact, one of the most interesting podcasts that we had done was with Revati Lal. She's written the book called The Anatomy of Hate, which chronicles the perpetrators of the Gujarat riot. Yeah. And it was an amazing, I think what the podcast also does for me is that it breaks barriers of geography. I have spoken to people, authors also in the UK, for a woman called Justice Sanj, an activist and a lawyer who helps girls from Punjab who go there and they find themselves with their passports being taken away in absolutely hostile environments. She helps them navigate, a divorce, get a job for themselves, and she helps these women. So we've had her. We've had a South African activist and a lawyer who's come on to my podcast and spoken about breast ironing of young girls. And here we've spoken about how grandmothers and mothers pass on their sexual biases to their daughters. So the podcast actually breaks barriers of geography, and it allows me to be able to widen my horizon in a very huge way, and I just absolutely love doing that.
Would you like to read something from your book?
Yeah, sure.
We have a little time, so if you would like to read an extract from Tanki Sala, because I think that would give people a glimpse into the kind of writing we're talking about here.
I'll read the shortest story. So I won't take too much of time, but I'm going to read you the shortest story, which again is from Shillong. It's called Chapter 3. The chapter says, Biswas will never speak about her. In Cherrapunji, the rain got so dense that the visibility went down to zero. The drops are large enough to poke and prod you to discomfort. The wire dividing the road and the valley are forever drenched. Yet, Meghalaya is her home. On the empty, rain-drenched mountain roads, the moist green moss spreads itself thin. Flowers bloom unhindered on the sides. In the midst of this magic lies Miss Wadri's Arak shop. It was a lone shop at the mountain bend. Very few people came to Wadri's shop. On days of a bad earthquake, the shop would shake furiously side by side. It steadied after a few seconds. She's a single woman from the matrilineal Khasi tribe of Meghalaya. In a tiny shop, she sells tea made with strong Assam tea leaves, biscuits, Maggi, and the local rice pork dishes. Every morning, Wadri wakes up to the sound of the rooster crowing at the start of dawn. From a tiny window with lace curtains, she can watch the old man carrying potatoes to sell. The potatoes are smeared with fresh mud, held in a cane basket on his back. His gait is slow and bent. The fog and the clouds diligently enter the room, bathing her in the morning light with a biting touch. Wadri puts the kettle on the stove for a strong cup of tea to wake up her senses. She then puts out the biscuit packets, the jars of the sour fruit, the berries as she stacks them neatly to start the day. Wadri wears her hair in a bun and cleans her teeth with the skin of the raw betel nut before the little mirror hanging precariously on the wall of a small room. She does not linger on the side. Wadri uses the little shed outside her room as her shop to earn her living. Most nights, the stray dogs sleep on the gunny sack she uses to stop the rainwater from entering her room. She doesn't mind this. The heat from the dogs' bodies enter her room through the gap below the door. On days of desperation and anguish, this warmth keeps her alive. She knows she won't be alone for too long. She will be like the rest, living in a full home with Biswas's children. For years, she's been waiting for a Bengali lover, Mr. Biswas, to marry her and take her home. Biswas had arrived in a lonely life on a rain-drenched evening. He was sad for reasons unknown to her, but there was a light in his smile that touched her heart. She offered him arrack to calm his nerves. He was cold from the winter rain, dipping to his toes. She offered him the heat from the coal burning in a mud stove. The rains poured incessantly. Biswas made himself comfortable and offered to help her cut the betel nut that Vaudrey sold in the shop. Soon Biswas began frequenting her shop. They shared an unspoken comfort between them. Vaudrey soon fell in love with Biswas. He gave her hope and warmth on evenings when the wind hissed like a snake in the mountains ahead. Vaudrey worked with her might during the day. She waited every evening to drink arrack with Biswas and sleep in his arms. Biswas promised her that he would soon tell his mother of his love for the tribal queen. He called her his CM. The potato seller stopped at his shop for a cup of tea, some pork and rice. As he ate, he said, "Biswas won't come anytime soon. His wife is getting ready to deliver the third child." Vaudrey ignored his monologue. She knew the bond she shared with Biswas. He belonged only to her. The potato seller shook his head. "Biswas is lying," he tells her. "He has a Bengali wife and 2 children. It is common knowledge." But Vaudrey refuses to acknowledge these stories about her lover. The 4 years of waiting have taken a toll on her. Miss Vaudrey is now shriveled and old. Her wait has been arduous, with long nights flooded with tears mixed with the Cherrapunji raindrops. She ruminated on the excuses Biswas made each time she wanted to meet his family. He never spoke about them. He never stayed the entire night either. She recalled the day the strong earthquake shook off her roof. She had begged him to stay. He did not. He left her with the cracks of the wall in her home and in her heart. Vaudrey felt the weight of her grief swallow her heart. She sits quietly today with her hands cupped in her little palms, chewing her betel nut and leaf. Even as they leave a red stain on the side of her thin lips, she ardently watches the 2 miners facing each other on the rain-drenched wires. They chirp and flutter their wings in harmony. The sun is almost fading and the town ahead lit bright as the roads ahead are empty and dark. Vaudrey guesses the length of the drop down to the jagged edges. She shuts her eyes and without a backward glance drops her body into the Cherrapunji Valley. The miner birds are the only witness to the red-checkered flying jensam and a free fall into oblivion. From afar, it resembled a failed parachute, falling slowly with the wind knocked out of its sails. The lantern flickers and dies on Maggie packets left lifeless, abandoned. The 2 birds cozy up to share their body warmth, to manage the cold inside what was once Vaudrey's old room. The mountains of Shillong remain unwavering in their place. Vaudrey's life was a silent act of prayer, and her death was equally shrouded in a silence that is omnipresent and in quiet beauty of the place. The death of Vaudrey did not make it to the local news, nor did the police check on her disappearance. It was just another case, a statistic best forgotten. Most blame the arrack and her loose morals, turning the page to another chapter, another life. Biswas never mentioned her name either. It's that story where you can't nail one issue, and hence a statistic at the end. Who was Vaudrey? A woman who, despite her matrilineal upbringing, did not believe she was able to live, laugh, and love despite the odds. How do you find a number to that?
So the book is actually full of these, what we might call the portraits of people's lives, and they're not just stories. That's what you're reminded of when you come to the statistic at the end, that each one of these stories fills out the statistics that we read in the newspapers, or sometimes don't read in the newspapers. So we have a few minutes left, and I'd like to open it up for questions. So are there any questions from the audience? Yes.
Hi. I just wanted to ask a question about social media. Social media, like any other tool, is just a tool. We can use it for what we want, right? Whatever purpose. Your story clearly is a story of positive impact of social media. And then I'm also a big believer in podcast as a media. I follow many of them. My question is, since social media has become such a big part of our lives, as much as the good that it has done, I think we have many examples across the world where it is used for spreading hate. I mean, we all know that very well, right? So, and whenever this comes up, this topic comes up, the most common response I've heard is, this happens with every new technology. Look at the invent of printing press, right? It was used initially to find and burn witches first. Those books were the most popular. But then knowing, that from our history, saying this is how technology was used, and as someone who is so prolific on social media, do you have any thoughts on who should do what? I mean, be it government, regulators, companies themselves, users, to maybe minimize that, undesirable impacts, or sort of get through that curve quicker. Anything that we can do? Any thoughts on that?
So it's just like the pressure cooker when it was first discovered. I think a lot of people said that this is going to really make women more idle. They are definitely going to get more time to gossip and not do enough kitchen work. And today the pressure cooker is an absolute necessity in every home. So it's the same way, I think, for social media. You can't ignore it, and the world is turning, so I'd much rather be an analog woman than stay back. Yes, definitely there's ill and good for any and everything. It's just like how we started with the computer today. I think distance is, my son lives in London and I can talk to him over a WhatsApp call. I don't need to spend so much of money to be able to be connected to him. So I think there's good and bad in everything. I mean, it's about how the jurisdiction that you use on your own. Have I been able to answer?
I also just wanted to point out that usually when we talk about people making this journey from social media into literature, I mean, the famous case is of Rupi Kaur, right, the Instagram poet. But we're always talking about these young influencers. And I think what is notable here is that, we have in Mohua the story of a woman who used technology to re-enter or to enter a world that was refusing to recognize her in multiple other ways. So yes, so that is one of the positives of a technology like this. Yeah. Do we have any other questions?
Hello. Hi, ma'am. It was great listening to this story. As you were saying, like, most of your characters are inspired by real people. So when they share the story, it's a lot. So how do you take that journey from long to short to get into a short story in that way? Like, how does that journey happen?
Actually, I think I would have been very happy if I had enough time for this book. My father was very disappointed that I'd quit my career and I was doing nothing, and I wanted to write this book. He was extremely unwell. And on the 31st of July, I launched my book, and on the 1st of August, he passed away. So that's why this book of short stories, and I was in a massive hurry to try and condense as much as I can. My second book is, of course, long form. And yes, I know that each of those lines now, when I sit down and look at it, I think I can write so much more.
So my question is to Usha Raman ma'am. Ma'am, as a professor of communications, you might be aware of the statement by Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message, but still you find your interest in podcasting, which is not a visual medium. So how can we manage the essence of writing or message should not be affected by the medium of podcasting?
Well, if you go back to that statement, which is, a corruption of McLuhan, the medium is the message. Basically how you choose to say something is as important as what you say, is what he's saying. So if you look at podcasting as a medium, it allows you to do things that text or image does not allow you to do, and of course it has its limitations. And maybe Mohua can speak more to this, but if you put somebody in front of a camera, the kind of conversation that you're able to have with that person is very different from the kind of conversation you can have with someone over just audio. You find that there is much more intimacy, people are willing to be themselves, whereas in front of a camera, we all freeze sometimes. So So yes, the podcasting as a medium does foreclose certain things, but it also allows you to do certain other things. So maybe Mohua would like to say something more on that.
So the podcasting market actually in 2010 was at 4 million. Now it is at 20 million at 2022. So it's obviously growing. And it's a great medium because you know what, you can be doing a whole lot of other things and you can just be listening to a podcast. You can be listening to audiobooks. And sadly, yes, I love the smell of good, new books, and I love the feel and touch of paper. But the world is embracing technology even when it comes to, authors and writers and interviewers, and this is the way the world is moving. So obviously, if there's an upward trend, that means people are definitely benefiting from this medium.
Have you thought about converting your book into an audiobook?
Yes, I have, yeah.
And will you be reading it?
Yes, I will be reading it, yeah.
Okay. So, do we have any last question?
Hi. So my question is more to do with the number of stories and number of content in general that we have across mediums. And you've worked both in print and podcasting. And I don't know if it's just me or how people feel in general about newer things being produced and more stories being told. And is that like a need to who do you think your audience is when you actually produce something? Who are you writing for? Because as a listener or as a reader, I don't know how to filter the amount of content that's being targeted at me.
So we have analytics, and that helps us understand the demographics of who are listeners, the places from where the podcast is downloaded the maximum. So the age is between 18 to 55. And that's the age bracket that we found our majority of our listeners. And if that answers your question, that's the gap. So podcasting, what it does is that, especially in writing, maybe, when I write an article that I regularly contribute to a few publications now, there probably is an audience who would like to read in depth about things. But we also have youngsters who are really rushing from their exams in their colleges and their schools. They would much rather listen to a concise interview with an expert from the industry within maybe 20 minutes, So that's where the podcast comes in.
But just to add to that, I think there are two things happening now. One is that there is a space for curated content. So you have a lot of people writing newsletters, for instance, that will point you to a curated set of readings, of podcasts, or videos, whatever. And so there is an increasing market for that, for people who can curate in intelligent ways for specific audiences. The other thing that is happening is that there is an explosion of content, particularly in podcasting, because it's such an easy medium, right, to produce. But then you have, like, Mohua's podcast ranges from 25 to 30 minutes per interview. And then on the other hand, you have somebody like Amit Verma, whose interviews run to 4 hours or more. And clearly there's an audience for both. So I think that's, it's not really an answer, but I think there is more and more room for more and more kinds of content. Okay, so I think we will have to stop there and make room for the next session. But thank you so much, Mohua. And for those of you who are interested in looking at the book, I think we do have copies out here in Book Point. So take a look and get the book. Thank you. Thank you, Mohua.
Thank you.